Welcome everyone to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we are about to unpack a truly incredible story. We're looking at the intense engineering rivalry and honestly, the harsh business realities between two literal titans of aviation, the Airbus A380 and the Boeing 747. If you love understanding how massive machines shape our world, well, you're in exactly the right place. So, what's the core question we're tackling today? It's this. Which super jumbo truly rules the skies? On one hand, we've got the original queen of the skies, the Boeing 747, and on the other, the ultimate super jumbo, the Airbus A380. But as you'll see, these aren't just two giant airplanes. They actually represent completely different visions for the future of modern aviation. Okay, let's dive into this. Just look at the sheer unprecedented scale of these machines. We are basically talking about airborne hotels here. Aircraft with wingspans stretching over 260 feet, capable of carrying hundreds of passengers and literally shrinking the globe. But to truly figure out which one was more successful, we've got to look past those massive exteriors and really dig into the data, the engineering, and the actual economics behind them. Here's a quick roadmap for our explainer today. We'll be hitting 1. Titans of the sky. 2. Origins and aviation history. 3. Passenger comfort and capacity. 4. Cargo, flexibility, and infrastructure. And finally, 5. The economics of super jumbos. Starting off with Section 1. Titans of the sky. Two divergent visions of aviation. Moving right along to Section 2. Origins and aviation history. Cold War ambition versus hub-and-spoke congestion. Check out this timeline. The Boeing 747 first took to the skies way back in 1969. This marvel was entirely a product of 1960s Cold War ambition and a crazy rapid expansion in air travel. Back then, fuel was incredibly cheap, and airlines, they just wanted raw thrust to carry hundreds of people farther and faster than ever before. But decades later, the aviation world had completely shifted. When the Airbus A380 finally had its first delivery in 2007, airlines were begging for low emissions, noise reduction, and maximum efficiency. But here's the wild part. Despite being separated by nearly 40 years at their start, production for both of these giants ended within just a single year of each other, 2021 for the A380 and 2022 for the 747. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why these planes look and function so differently. See, Airbus looked at the growing congestion at major airports and bet all their chips on the hub-and-spoke model. Since landing slots at busy airports are super scarce, Airbus figured airlines would want to pack up to 850 passengers onto a single flight to maximize their revenue per landing slot. Boeing, on the flip side, bet that passengers would actually prefer flying point-to-point, direct flights between smaller airports using smaller, more efficient planes. And they figured the 747 could just adapt to handle specific high-demand or cargo-heavy routes. All right, Section 3, Passenger Comfort and Capacity, the pros of the A380. Just take a second to appreciate the massive profile of the A380. Because it features two full, straight-walled passenger decks, it gives you a cabin feel unlike absolutely anything else in the sky. And it's not just about legroom, it's a whole sensory experience. The engine manufacturers used highly advanced swept fan blades and acoustic liners specifically to kill cabin noise. Passengers constantly say flying on an A380 is so incredibly quiet and stable, it literally feels like you're just gliding through the air. But when we contrast the two side by side, the differences for the average passenger are huge. The A380's unmatched volume allowed airlines to go crazy, installing premium lounges, bars, and yes, even fully functioning showers in first class. The Boeing 747-8, while obviously still magnificent, only has a partial upper deck and a much narrower fuselage. It has smaller windows and, to be honest, noticeably louder engine noise, especially on older models. Though I've got to say, sitting up in that iconic upper deck of the 747 still gives you this incredibly cozy, exclusive, and deeply nostalgic aviation experience. Which brings us to Section 4, Cargo, Flexibility, and Infrastructure, the pros of the 747. Now, while the A380 slightly edges out the 747-8 in maximum range and passenger cargo volume, look at that very bottom row of the data. The Boeing 747-8 freighter boasts a staggering 30,288 cubic feet of cargo volume. The A380? 0? Yeah, literally no dedicated freighter variant of the A380 exists. Its massive volume was optimized entirely for humans, which actually made it way too heavy and totally impractical to serve as an efficient cargo hauler. Let's move to and see how this builds into an even bigger issue: airport infrastructure. The A380, with its mind-boggling 1.2 million pound max takeoff weight and a 261-foot wingspan, basically out-engineered the airports themselves. It required specialized infrastructure. We're talking heavily reinforced runways, widened taxiways, and entirely new double-decker gates. Meanwhile, the Boeing 747-8 was designed as a smart evolution of a legacy airframe. It fit neatly into existing airport layouts with barely any modifications, which massively lowered operational and maintenance costs for the airlines. On to our final stop, Section 5, the economics of super jumbos, the irony of aviation design. 2.8 liters. Now that might just sound like a couple of large soda bottles, but in the aviation world, that number is absolutely massive. See, the Boeing 747-8 used advanced GEnx engines, which were actually derived from the 787 Dreamliner program. Thanks to those next-generation engines, the 747-8 consistently delivered a highly competitive fuel burn of just 2.8 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers per seat. So the crucial point is this. On paper, the A380 was an absolute marvel, burning only about 3 liters per 100 kilometers per seat. I mean, that's literally better than many small cars. But there's a massive catch here. To actually achieve that efficiency, airlines had to consistently fill it to the brim with over 500 passengers. And if you can't fill those seats, an underloaded A380 instantly turns into a massive financial burden. The 747-8's slightly smaller size just made it way easier to fill, day in and day out. And this brings us to the core takeaway of our explainer today: the great irony of aviation design. You can engineer the quietest, most luxurious, absolute most fuel-efficient aircraft on paper, but if real-world passenger demand fluctuates, or say a massive global pandemic hits, all that highly specialized efficiency just completely vanishes. Ultimately, the economic adaptability of the 747, the fact that it could fly passengers, haul massive amounts of cargo, or even serve military roles, won out over the rigid, passenger-only scale of the A380. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how brutally honest the aviation industry can be. Analyst Richard Abulafia famously went on the record calling the A380 simply the dumbest program of modern times. Ouch, right? It's a harsh assessment, for sure, but it reflects a tough reality. Airbus spent an estimated $20 billion, with a B, on research and development for an aircraft that only ever secured 251 deliveries. That is way short of their 700-plane target. Oh, and it effectively found zero popularity in the massive U.S. market. Even Airbus's own leadership had to face the music. Former Airbus CEO Tom Enders admitted they might have just been 10 years too late. You see, relaxed aviation regulations meant that hyper-efficient two-engine jets like the Boeing 787 or Airbus's own A350 could now safely fly those exact same long-haul routes over the oceans. That single regulatory shift essentially rendered the massive four-engine fuel consumption of both the A380 and the passenger 747 totally obsolete for modern airlines. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. As airlines continue to pivot towards smaller, hyper-efficient twin-engine jets that can fly directly point-to-point, have we already seen the peak of the passenger super jumbo? The 747 is going to live on for decades as a cargo workhorse, sure, but the A380's days are strictly numbered. It just goes to show that sometimes the most impressive engineering feat doesn't always make the best business sense. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep asking questions, keep looking up, and I'll catch you next time.